Hey, welcome to my first live stream. So, what this is rough and tumble. You get to see the what goes into the sausage of making part of an audiobook. Before this point, I've prepped the book. I've made notes on the characters. Some of the characters are from a prior book, so I am trying to maintain some consistency between what they were then and what they are now. So this is the Tuck Me In Tales series. I guess I'll dive in. This is Old Mr. Crow. Chapters are short here. I'll stop in, check, answer questions if you have any in between chapters as I'm mixing things down. Otherwise, you get to see how things go. So I bring up my DAW. I use Studio One, by the way. And I have my chapter set up and ready to go. And I guess we're ready to dive in. One, the outlaw. A good many of the forest people claimed that old Mr. Crow was an outlaw. They said he was always roving about, robbing Farmer Green of his corn and his chickens, and digging up the potatoes when they shot their sprouts above the surface not in the potato patch, of the potato patch. A good many of the forest people claimed that old Mr. Crow was an outlaw. They said he was always roving about, robbing Farmer Green of his corn and his chickens, and digging up the potatoes when they shot their sprouts above the surface of the potato patch. And everybody was aware that the old gentleman stole eggs from the nests of his smaller neighbors. It was even whispered that Mr. Crow had been known to devour baby robins. But perhaps some of the things said of him were not true. I want to do a little more emphasis. That Mr. Crow had been known to devour baby robins. But perhaps some of the things said of him were not true. Though if he really was an outlaw, he seemed to enjoy being one. He usually laughed whenever Johnny Green or his father tried to catch him, or when they attempted to frighten him. And on the whole, he was quite the boldest, noisiest, and most impertinent of all the creatures that lived in Pleasant Valley. His house stood in a tall elm, not too far from the cornfield, and those that dwelt near him never could complain that the neighborhood was quiet. It was never quiet where old Mr. Crow was. Many of the smaller birds feared him, but they couldn't help laughing at him sometimes. He was so droll with his solemn face, his sedate walk, and his comical gestures. As for his voice, it was loud and harsh, and those that heard too much of it often wished that he would use it less. I hit that a little differently. As for his voice, it was loud and harsh, and those that heard too much of it often wished that he would use it less. That's still not right. As for his voice, it was loud and harsh, and those that heard too much of it often wished that he would use it less. Mr. Crow's best friends sometimes remarked that people did not understand him. They said that he helped Farmer Green more than he injured him, for he did a great deal in the way of eating beetles, cutworms, and grasshoppers, as well as many other insects that tried to destroy Farmer Green's crops. So you see, mouth noise. As well as many other insects that tried to destroy Farmer Green's crops. So you see, he had his good points as well as his bad ones. For a number of years, Mr. Crow had spent each summer in Pleasant Valley under the shadow of Blue Mountain. He usually arrived from the south in March and left in October. And though many of his friends stayed in the north and braved the winter's cold and storms, old Mr. Crow was too fond of a good meal to risk going hungry after the snow lay deep upon the ground. At that season, such of his neighbors as remained too fond of a good meal to risk going hungry after the snow lay deep upon the ground. At that season, such of his neighbors as remained behind often dined upon dried berries, which they found clinging to the trees and bushes. But so long as Mr. Crow could go where it was warmer and find seafood along the shore, he would not listen to his friends' pleas that he spend the winter with them. "Until I can no longer travel as the crow flies, I shall not spend a winter here," he would say to them in a solemn wink. Nope. "As the crow flies, I shall not spend a winter here," he would say to them with, let's pick that up. "As the crow flies, I shall not spend a winter here," he would say to them with a solemn wink. That was one of his favorite jokes. He had heard that when anybody asked Farmer Green how far it was to the village, he always answered, "It's 9 miles as the crow flies," meaning that it was 9 miles in a straight line. Old Mr. Crow thought that the saying was very funny, but then he usually laughed at Farmer Green, no matter what he said or did. You can see that Mr. Crow was no respecter of persons. End of chapter. Open the door for some air. So these stories, given their name, Tuck Me In Tales, setting my markers, mixing down. Okay, they were written to be just short little bedtime tales. You read the one chapter to the kiddo, the end, hopefully then kiddo goes to sleep, and then the next chapter picks up the next day. But they can be listened to in a row. So there's my mixed down chapter. Now I need to move it over where I can find it. I like to keep my mixed downs, the final version, the wave of the chapter all together. Recent upgrade to Windows 11 means things are in a slightly different place than I'm used to. Do need a new folder. The Tale of Old Mr. Crow. Is this like watching paint dry? Sorry, the next one will go faster. All right, there it is. Close it, save it, open a new chapter. I have several templates here. The one I'm using for this is specifically for things that I'm going to do post-production on myself. If I'm sending files to an audio producer or a publisher, they want fully raw. This I just have for my own use, a little bit of gain put on the files and a limiter. So this is file 002. One of the problems with shorter chapters is you get to do all this chapter naming stuff more often. All right. On to chapter 2. Two, something lost. It may seem a strange thing for old Mr. Crow to have had... Kind of went into I'm reading a book mode there. 2, something lost. It may seem a strange thing for old Mr. Crow to have had no other name, such as John or James or Josephus, but that was the way he preferred it to be. Indeed, his parents had given him another name years before, but Mr. Crow did not like it. And after he grew up, he dropped... Somehow that W had an extra syllable. Another name years before, but Mr. Crow did not like it. And after he grew up, he dropped the name. To tell the truth, the reason for his coming to Pleasant Valley in the beginning was because no one knew him there. And though his new friends thought it odd that he should be called simply Mr. Crow, he was satisfied. Of course, that was when he was younger. As the years passed, he became known as Old Mr. Crow. But no one called him that except behind his back. And since he knew nothing of that, it never annoyed him in the least. Now Mr. Crow had spent a good many pleasant seasons in Pleasant Valley, and nobody had ever found out much about him. But at last there came a day. Sorry, getting a little froggy. However much I warm up, the first few pages can get a little rough. Special tea, lots of water. And since he knew nothing of that, it never annoyed him in the least. Now Mr. Crow had spent a good many pleasant seasons in Pleasant Valley, and nobody had ever found out much about him. But at last there came a day when he was very much upset. He was roaming through the woods on a sunny afternoon when someone called to him. He stopped, and presently a person in a bright blue coat came hurrying up. It was a noisy fellow known as Jasper Jay, who was new in the neighborhood. "I thought I recognized you," he shouted to Mr. Crow. "As soon as I saw you fly past, I said to myself, that looks like Cousin—" Mr. Crow stopped him just in time. It was true that the two were cousins. One look at their big feet and their big bills would have told you that. Now, Mr. Crow sometimes saw Jasper on the trips he made each fall and spring, and Jasper knew Mr. Crow's name. He had almost said it, too, at the top of his boisterous voice. "What's the matter?" Jasper Jay inquired, for Mr. Crow was looking all around. "Have you lost anything?" "Yes," said Mr. Crow. "I've lost my name, and I don't want to find it again either." What he was really doing was this. He was peering about to see whether anybody might be listening. Jasper Jay's mouth fell open. He was so astonished. "What?" Jasper Jay's mouth fell open. He was so astonished. "Why, what do you mean, cousin?" Mr. Crow stopped him again. That's a cutoff. Not cousin, but cousin. So let's go back. Jasper Jay's mouth fell open. He was so astonished. "Why, what do you mean, cousin?" Mr. Crow stopped him again. "Don't call me that," he said severely. Let's make it sound severe. "Why, what do you mean, cousin?" Mr. Crow stopped him again. "Don't call me that," he said severely. "I'm known here as Mr. Crow, and I'll thank you to call me by that name and no other." That astonished Jasper Jay all the more, because he had never known Mr. Crow to thank anybody for anything. Well, he murmured faintly. And then it was Mr. Crow's turn to be surprised, for he had never heard his cousin Jasper speak in anything but the loudest scream. When Mr. Crow explained that he had never liked the name his parents had given him, and that he wanted nobody in Pleasant Valley to learn what it was. And I missed something there. He had never heard his cousin Jasper speak in anything but the loudest scream. Then Mr. Crow explained that he had never liked the name his parents had given him, and that he wanted nobody in Pleasant Valley to learn what it was. "You must promise me," said Mr. Crow, and there was a dangerous glitter in his eye. "You must promise me that you'll never speak my name again." "Why, certainly," Jasper Jay replied. "I'm glad to oblige you, I'm sure. And I promise that I'll never, ever, never mess that up." "Why, certainly," Jasper Jay replied. "I'm glad to oblige you, I'm sure. And I promise that I'll never, never, never again mention your name aloud, Cousin Jim." There. The secret is out. Jasper Jay said Mr. Crow's name without once thinking what he was about. And Mr. Crow was so angry that he gave his cousin a sound beating on the spot. "I'll teach you," he said, "to do as you're told." And he did. For after that, Jasper Jay always remembered that to him, as to everybody else, his black cousin must be known only as Mr. Crow. You see, Jim Crow was a name that Mr. Crow could not abide. The mere sound of it made him wince, and he was not a person of tender feelings either. Yeah. We hit on some stuff here. All right, end of chapter. Mark the end, mix down. Oh yes, chapter 3 is cute. Check in the chat just to see if anybody was there or had questions. And in the proper folder. All right. Close it, save it, make a new one. Get some oxygen. I do have a fan. It does bring in some air circulation. But in order to turn it up fast enough to really make a difference, it's too loud. Chapter 3. The Giant Scarecrow. That was really mouth clicky. Let's do that again. So to avoid the mouth clicks, I tried to hydrate well yesterday, keep sodium low, got up this morning, had some more water, clearly not enough. I've got lozenges and such in here, but those are last resort. The Giant Scarecrow. Farmer Green always claimed that Mr. Crow was a ruffian and a robber. "That old chap has been coming here every summer for years," he said to his son Johnny one day. "I always know him when I see him because he's the biggest of all the crows that steal my corn." That was Farmer Green's way of looking at a certain matter. But old Mr. Crow regarded it otherwise. He knew well enough what Farmer Green thought of his trick of digging up the newly planted corn, and his own idea and Farmer Green's did not agree at all. Now this matter was something that old Mr. Crow never mentioned unless somebody else spoke of it first. And then Mr. Crow would shake his head slowly and sigh and say, "It's strange that Farmer Green doesn't understand how much I help him. I'm as busy as I can be all summer long destroying insects that injure his crops. And since I help Farmer Green to raise his corn, I'm sure I have as good a right to share it." "All summer long destroying insects that injure his crops. And since I help Farmer Green to raise his corn, I'm sure I have as good a right to a share of it as the horses that plow the field or the men that hoe it. Farmer Green gives them corn to eat, but he never once thinks of giving me any." You see, there are always two sides to every question, and that was Mr. Crow's. But Farmer Green never knew how Mr. Crow felt about the matter, and every spring at corn planting time, he used to set up scarecrows in his cornfield, hoping that they would frighten the crows away. And so they did, At least some of the younger crows were afraid of those straw-stuffed dummies.
Set up scarecrows in his cornfield, hoping that they would frighten the crows away.
And so they did. At least some of the younger crows were afraid of those straw-stuffed dummies with their hats tipped over their faces, or upon one side, and their empty sleeves flapping in the winds that swept through the valley. But old Mr. Crow was too wise to be fooled so easily. He would scratch up the corn at the very feet of a scarecrow and chuckle at the same time. It must not be supposed that Farmer Green did not...
The feet of a scarecrow and chuckle at the same time.
It must not be supposed that Farmer Green did not know what was going on. He often caught sight of Mr. Crow in the cornfield. But it always happened that Mr. Crow saw him too, and Farmer Green could never get near the old rogue. At last, Johnny Green's father spent a whole evening trying to think of some way in which to outwit Mr. Crow, and by bedtime, he had hit upon a plan that he liked. The next day, with Johnny to help him, he set to work to build a monster scarecrow. It was twice as high as the tallest man that was ever seen. And for a hat, Farmer Green set on its straw head a huge tin pail, which glittered when the sun shone upon it. "I'll fix him," said Farmer Green as he stood off and looked at the giant. And as for his son Johnny, he danced up and down and shouted, he was so pleased. But Mr. Crow,
He danced up and down and shouted, he was so pleased.
But Mr. Crow was not pleased when he flew toward the cornfield the next day and saw the great figure of a man there, with a terrible glittering helmet upon his head. And Mr. Crow noticed something upon the giant's shoulder that looked very like a gun. The old gentleman swerved quickly to one side and never stopped his flight until he reached the woods. And that night, Farmer Green felt quite merry. "I've scared that old crow away at last," he said. End chapter. So one of the things that I do while I'm narrating is my hands are always busy. They're doing stuff. And I found that I was pretty consistently wearing through the fronts of my shirts, playing with the hems. So now I keep stones that I worry with and play with. Today's stone was a gift from Jennifer Gelararia. Gratitude. And see, with all that talking, I completely lost track of where my things are. There we go. I can talk and move files at the same time. And while I'm thinking of it, I'm just going to open that folder I've been moving things to and make sure all 3 files are there. Yes. Gotta double check yourself. The more often, the better. New song. It's called A Song in the DAWs because most people use them for music. But it's a chapter. And some people record continuously the whole book on one file. Others do different tracks within one file. I just find it takes a little bit longer at this stage to make a new file per chapter, but later it's just a lot easier for me to keep track of things. Now we're dealing in Roman numerals here. I did mess up on the Tale of Jolly Robin that comes out next week. And I had to go back and re-record 11 because I said 9 again. This is chapter 4. I started to write Tale of Old Mr. Robin, and that is not this book. Chapter 4. Thought I was gonna burp. Wasn't a burp, but it was a belly noise. Mouth noise. All right, we'll get going. Isn't it glamorous? 4. Caught napping. It was several days before Mr. Crow stopped sulking. He was very angry with Farmer Green for placing the giant in the cornfield, and
It was several days before Mr. Crow stopped sulking.
He was very angry with Farmer Green for placing the giant in the cornfield, and he told his friends that he had about made up his mind he would move to some other neighborhood. "Farmer Green will be sorry after I'm gone," he remarked. "He'll miss me when he finds that his crops are being eaten by hundreds of insects." Whether he meant millions or hundreds, it would be hard to say. You see, Mr. Crow was not good at arithmetic. He always had trouble counting higher than 10. And then, the very day before he had planned to move, Mr. Crow noticed something that made him... Something that made him. We can go mid-sentence here.
And then, the very day before he had planned to move,
Mr. Crow noticed something that made him change his mind. He was sitting in the top of a tall pine, looking mournfully across the cornfield where he dared not go, when he saw a small bird drop down upon the giant's head and disappear. "He's eaten her!" Mr. Crow exclaimed. But as he stared, the little bird appeared again and flew away. Old Mr. Crow knew it was a mother wren, and he was not long in discovering that she had built a nest under the tin pan that the giant wore in place of a hat. That was just a little, not enough oxygen for that, and a little froggy.
as he stared, the little bird appeared again and flew away.
Old Mr. Crow knew it was a mother wren, and he was not long in discovering that she had built a nest under the tin pan that the giant wore in place of a hat. That was enough for Mr. Crow. The secret was out. The thing he had feared was nothing... Weird noise. Sorry.
That was enough for Mr. Crow. The secret was out.
The thing he had feared was nothing worse than a straw scarecrow with a stick stuck over its shoulder to look like a gun. The old gentleman felt quite foolish for a time, but he did not let that fact prevent his scratching up enough corn to make up for the meals he had lost. After that, he quickly recovered his spirits, and he forgot all about moving. But if Mr. Crow felt merry, you can be sure that Farmer Green did not. It was his turn to feel foolish, and he vowed that he would get even with Mr. Crow if it took him all summer. Meanwhile, Mr. Crow grew careless. He really thought that Farmer Green wouldn't be able to think of any other way of keeping him out of the cornfield, and he spent so much of his time there that he grew quite fat. He became somewhat short-breathed, too, and his voice grew wheezier than ever. But Mr. Crow did not mind these things. He was getting all the corn he could eat, and he was happy. Then there came a morning at last as he soared down upon the cornfield, when he noticed that the huge scarecrow was gone. There was another, a shorter figure in its place. But to careless Mr. Crow's glance, it seemed no different from the scarecrows he had known all his life. He paid little or no attention to the image. It bore...
He had known all his life. He paid little or no attention to the image.
It wore the big pan upon its head. He observed that much, and it made him laugh. Then Mr. Crow began to scratch for his breakfast. But he had not eaten a single kernel when a terrible roar broke the early morning stillness, and there was a sound as if...
Colonel, when a terrible roar broke the early morning stillness.
And there was a sound as of hail falling all around him. Mr. Crow knew right away what had happened. The Scarecrow had come to life and tried to shoot him. And if ever a bird hurried away from that field, it was old Mr. Crow. It was almost night before he remembered that he had nothing to... Y'all, I'm getting self-conscious about how much I move my head when I'm talking and narrating.
A bird hurried away from that field. It was old Mr. Crow.
It was almost night before he remembered that he had had nothing to eat all day. And so anybody can see how frightened he was. All right there.
Before he remembered that he had had nothing to eat all day.
And so anybody can see how frightened he was. Farmer Green walked home to his own breakfast with his gun resting upon his shoulder. I didn't get him, he told Johnny, but I must have scared him out of a year's growth. I'm going to give him a little, see if I can give a little more oomph to that last sentence of a chapter.
I didn't get him, he told Johnny,
but I must have scared him out of a year's growth. So figuring out what if characters should have dialects. I'm kind of being loose here. Probably this is set in the Northeast. There's mention of, well, they're in a valley. There's a nearby mountain. Later, there's mention of more mountains. And yet it's a place that people, anthropomorphized birds are people to me. The birds do fly south, some of them for the winter. And given when this was written in the 19-teens, the Northeast is probably most likely. Could be Northern Rockies, but given the species, probably Northeast. But it's left kind of vague on purpose, I think. So it can be where you are. You can just imagine that these are the animals around you. Doing another double check. All my chapters are there. That used to be a quicker check, but again, Windows updates, things moved slightly. I haven't fully adjusted and made everything automatic yet. And we are on to chapter 5. This part, as I'm typing in the name of the file, if I were doing it for a publisher, I would have to name the file according to the publisher specifications. The first few iterations of these files will be for me only, so I can name them for how my brain works. I'm catching things and going back and re-recording and punching in that I catch myself reading incorrectly. I will have someone or a program go through and compare what I've read to the words on the page to make sure that that's correct. and I will have to do several proof listens as I do the post-production on this. But I'm catching what I can as I go. Also, in some situations, there would be 3 people doing this. I would still be narrating. There would be someone else working the computer doing the engineering. And in really nice situations, there'd also be a director, someone else listening to what I'm saying, comparing it to the text, deciding if there needs to be a reread or a shift in interpretation. My brain's doing all 3 of those things as I sit here in this booth, which is pretty normal for most narrators now, but there are those situations that are very nice, where other brains can take over part of that work. 5. A great disappointment. After Farmer Green missed a word.
5. A great disappointment.
After Farmer Green came so near shooting him, Mr. Crow lost his taste for corn for a whole year. He was afraid it would never come back to him. And he worried so much that he grew quite thin, and his feathers began to look rusty. His friends were somewhat alarmed about his health, many of them saying that if they were in Mr. Crow's place, they would be careful. Now, strange as it may seem, that was exactly Mr. Crow's trouble. He was too careful. He was always on the lookout for a gun or a trap, and being constantly on guard was bad for his nerves. Luckily, a winter spent in the South, Froggy, clearing your throat is very bad for your vocal cords, by the way. Don't do that.
And being constantly on guard was bad for his nerves.
Luckily, a winter spent in the South did a great deal to improve Mr. Crow's health, as well as his state of mind. When he came back to Pleasant Valley the following March, he told his cousin Jasper Jay that he really felt he would be able to eat corn again. As the spring lengthened, that feeling grew upon Mr. Crow. And when planting time arrived, the black rascal had his old look again. It was a very solemn look, unless you regarded him closely.
When planting time arrived, the black rascal had his old look again.
It was a very solemn look, unless you regarded him closely. But it was a very sly, knowing look if you took the pains to stare boldly into his eye. Farmer Green would have liked to do that, because then he might have caught old Mr. Crow. As it happened, he did not catch sight of Mr. Crow the very first day he did catch sight. Sometimes you get a little tongue-tied, and it's because your brain says, wait, you said that other word earlier wrong.
Liked to do that, because then he might have caught old Mr. Crow.
As it happened, he did catch sight of Mr. Crow the very first day he began to plant his corn. I declare, there's that old crow again, he exclaimed. He's come back to bother me once more. But maybe I'm smarter than he thinks. Not old, just Mr.
For me once more. But maybe I'm smarter than he thinks.
Mr. Crow knew better than to come too near the men who were working in the cornfield. He just sat on the fence on the further side of the road and watched them for a while. And he was getting hungrier. I'm gonna go back. The frogs are back. Hopefully I just clicked into the right spot. We'll see.
Once more. But maybe I'm smarter than he thinks.
Mr. Crow knew better than to come too near the men who were working in the cornfield. He just sat on the fence on the further side of the road and watched them for a while. And he was getting hungrier every minute. But he had no chance to scratch up any corn that day. The next day, however, the men had moved farther down the field. Mr. Crow had been waiting for that. He flew to the edge of the plowed ground which they had planted the afternoon before and dug up a kernel of corn. He didn't stop to look at it. He knew it was corn just by the feeling of it, and it was inside his mouth in a twinkling. And in another twinkling, it was outside again. For Mr. Crow did not like the taste at all. "That's a bad one," he remarked. And then he tried another kernel, and another, and another. But they were all like the first one. Thereupon Mr. Crow paused and looked at the corn, and he saw at once that there was something wrong. The kernels were gray.
He saw at once that there was something wrong.
The kernels were gray instead of a golden yellow. He pecked at one of them and found that it...
The kernels were gray instead of a golden yellow.
He pecked at one of them and found that the gray coating hid something black and sticky. I'm going to do that again.
The kernels were gray instead of a golden yellow.
He pecked at one of them and found that the gray coating hid something black and sticky. That was tar, though Mr. Crow did not know it. And the gray covering was wood ashes, in which Farmer Green had rolled the corn after dipping it in tar. The tar made the corn taste bad, and the wood ashes kept it from sticking to one's fingers. "This is a great disappointment," said Mr. Crow very solemnly. "Of all the mean tricks that Farmer Green has played on me, this is by far the meanest. It would serve him right if I went away and never caught a single grasshopper or cutworm all summer." But there were two reasons that prevented Mr. Crow's leaving Pleasant Valley. He liked his old home, and he liked grasshoppers and cutworms too. So he stayed until October. And the strange part of it was that he never once discovered that Farmer Green had planted tarred corn only on a...
And cutworms, too. So he stayed until October.
And the strange part of it was that he never once discovered that Farmer Green had planted tarred corn.
And cutworms, too. So he stayed until October.
And the strange part of it was that he never once discovered that Farmer Green had planted tarred corn only in a border around the field. Inside that border, the corn was of the good old yellow kind that Mr. Crow liked. And so, for once, weird noise,
the corn was of the good old yellow kind that Mr. Crow liked.
And so, for once, Farmer Green outwitted old Mr. Crow. By the end of the summer, his corn had grown so tall and borne so many big ears that Farmer Green took some of it to the county fair. And everybody who saw it there said that it was the finest corn that was ever seen in those parts. Let's go back a little.
Big ears. That Farmer Green took some of it to the county fair.
And everyone who saw it there said it was the finest corn that ever was seen in those parts. Do you go to your county fair? I highly recommend it. You can see animals, you can see people's handicrafts. There's often live music. And you can see what the farmers have been growing And there are things for houseplants and arranged flowers and how well people have grown herbs. And if that's your thing, I enjoy going most every year. And I've entered sewing and crochet projects just for fun. Gotten some ribbons. Through the file, double checking. Okay. So my files are there, but I see. I had an extra space in this one. I'm gonna rename it. Get rid of that space. Things just weren't lining up right. Again, these are just for me at this stage. It's not going to bother anybody else that it's not uniform, but it's good habits to make sure you're naming your files consistently. Chapter 6. I hit enter too soon. I'm going to rename. We're going to do this the last couple times. We have at floor level 70 degrees and at ceiling height 84 degrees. I'm somewhere in the middle. So often in the winter I'll have, I don't know, 2 layers of pants and 3 layers of socks on my bottom half and the top half in a tank top because it gets interesting weather in here. Six. Mr. Crow in trouble. After Mr. Crow found out that Farmer Green had put tar on his corn, Mr. Crow was so angry that he flew for a good many miles before stopping. And then, as he started to walk along the limb that leads to his house in the tall elm, he noticed for the first time that he could barely move his right foot. He looked down, and he was startled when he saw that his foot, that was just weird how that came out.
Noticed for the first time that he could barely move his right foot.
He looked down, and he was startled when he saw that his foot was many times its usual size. Moreover, it did not look like a foot at all, being a strange, huge, shapeless thing. Old Mr. Crow was alarmed. Never in all his life had he found himself in such a plight. He stayed at home only long enough to tie his foot up in a bandage, which made it look bigger than ever. And then he hurried off as fast as he could fly to call upon Aunt Polly Woodchuck, who was said to be an excellent doctor. Aunt Polly was at home, and since Mr. Crow could not crawl inside her house, she received him in her dooryard. As soon as she looked at Mr. Crow's foot, Aunt Polly Woodchuck threw up both her hands. Oh dear. I can hear her in my head. What's she going to sound like? Oh, she's a bit north Midwestern, just a little. Ooh, and she's higher pitched. Yeah, don't you know? Okay, something like that. Yeah, let me make notes. A little bit. So when she pops up in the next book, I know what to do. All right. So she's a little higher. She's a little smoother. She's got a little, a light north Midwestern lilt. All right. Not a lot. She's not from any place specific there. Just, you know, that kind of, yeah, nurturing sort of, yeah.
Aunt Polly Woodchuck threw up both her hands.
You have gout, she cried, and it's the worst case I ever saw. That made Mr. Crow feel proud and happy. What about a cure? He inquired. I shouldn't like to have my foot like this always. If you could cure it in a week, I would be...
I shouldn't like to have my foot like this always.
If you could cure it in a week, I would be satisfied. But I want at least a week in which to show my foot to my friends. Oh, now I gotta get back into her mode. Sometimes I can switch back and forth, but she's new. I gotta back out a little bit here.
Want at least a week in which to show my foot to my friends.
You'll be lucky if you're better in a month, said Aunt Polly. Oh, she shifted Irish. That's not what we're going for here. The R's are similar. That's where the shift happened.
Want at least a week in which to show my foot to my friends.
You'll be lucky if you're better in a month, said Aunt Polly Woodchuck. Aunt Polly Woodchuck.
Friends. You'll be lucky if you're better in a month,
said Aunt Polly Woodchuck. You must be very careful about what you eat. Oh no, she's shifting Irish again. I don't know how that's happening.
You'll be lucky if you're better in a month, said Aunt Polly Woodchuck.
You must be very careful about what you eat. You may have all the ginseng and Jimson weed and... Oh no. I forgot to look up a word. All right. So, what we do... For this, I want Euglish. Ella campaign. Ideally, I would do all this before. Ooh. Ella campaign. Not on Euglish. All right. Next, we go to Merriam-Webster. Dictionary. Ella campaign. A large, coarse Eurasian composite herb that has yellow ray flowers and is naturalized in the U.S. And it is pronounced Ella campaign. Ella campaign. I guessed right. So again, ideally, you look those things up before. Saves time in the booth. All right. Now we got to get Ella campaign that you wish. We're going to go back. Go back.
You'll be lucky if you're better in a month, said Aunt Polly Woodchuck.
You must be very careful about what you eat. You may have all the ginseng and Jimson weed and Ella campaign that you wish, and drink plenty of catnip tea. But until you're quite well again, don't touch corn, grasshoppers, birds' eggs, field mice, or elderberries. If you eat such things, your other foot may swell, and then you'll be unable to walk at all. Mr. Crow was no longer happy. Those are the things I like best, the last that you mentioned, he said. And the food you tell me I may have is exactly the kind I've never cared for in the least. As for catnip tea, I can't swallow it, he groaned. Haven't you some other remedy? Can't you give me a pill? But Aunt Polly Woodchuck said there was no other way. I never can remember what you've told me, Mr. Crow objected. I'll fix that, said Aunt Polly. And then she went into her house, returning presently with a basket. From the basket, she drew forth a handful of herbs, which she gave to Mr. Crow. Take these, she said, and put them in your right-hand pocket. These are what you may eat, a sample of each herb. Straight away, not straight a way, it's written straight way.
Pocket. These are what you may eat, a sample of each herb.
Straightway she gave Mr. Crow 2 more handfuls of not of herbs, of food.
Pocket. These are what you may eat. A sample of each herb.
Straightway she gave Mr. Crow 2 more handfuls of food. 2 more handfuls of food.
Pocket. These are what you may eat. A sample of each herb.
Straightway she gave just Mr. Crow.
These are what you may eat. A sample of each herb.
Straightway she gave Mr. Crow 2 more handfuls of food. And here, she continued, here are things you mustn't eat. Put them in your left-hand pocket. And at dinner time tonight, you won't have the least bit of trouble knowing that you're allowed to have what you're allowed.
Here are things you mustn't eat. Put them in your left-hand pocket.
And at dinner time tonight, you won't have the least bit of trouble knowing that you're allowed to have what you're allowed to have. My goodness. My goodness.
Here are things you mustn't eat. Put them in your left-hand pocket.
And at dinner time tonight, you won't have the least bit of trouble knowing what you're allowed to have. Mr. Crow thanked her politely, but he felt somewhat angry just the same. He saw that he was going to have a very unpleasant time. For if there was one thing that Mr. Crow liked, it was good food, and plenty of it. How's he gonna do on his new diet? We'll find out in the next chapter. I think we're good. We can fit in one more. We may not finish it by 11. Was only planning on being here for an hour. But we'll do one more chapter. All right. Close and save. Open a new one. Self-post template. That folder. On to chapter 7. Tale of Old Mr. Crow. Seven. Mr. Crow's bad memory. It was true, as Mr. Crow had said, that he had a bad memory. By the time he reached home, he had forgotten almost everything the famous doctor, Aunt Polly Woodchuck, had said to him. Just pausing there to remind you that this would be the next night, so we're reiterating some things to remind kiddos what they heard last week. Not unlike Dickens writing Great Expectations as a serial. A lot of repetition in that book because he knew people weren't necessarily reading them back to back to back. But now we get to editorializing. Sorry.
And almost everything the famous doctor, Aunt Polly Woodchuck, had said to him.
About all Mr. Crow could recall of their talk was that Aunt Polly had told him his swollen foot was caused by gout, and that she had given him samples of such food as he might eat, and also such as he mightn't. He had put the 2 kinds in different pockets, just as Aunt Polly had suggested. And all he had to do when he was hungry was to look into his pockets and see what food he might safely choose for his meal. Well, Mr. Crow was hungry as a bear by the time he reached his house. And the first thing he did was to feel in his left-hand pocket. He drew forth a kernel of corn. "Good," he cried. "That's exactly what I'd like for my dinner. And if Farmer Green hadn't tarred his corn before planting it, I know exactly where I'd go." Then he thought deeply for a few minutes. "I'll go over to the corn crib and see if I can't find some corn on the ground," he exclaimed a little later. While he was thinking, he ate the sample of corn without once noticing what he did. So Mr. Crow flew swiftly to the farmyard. It happened that there was nobody about, and luckily Mr. Crow found enough corn scattered near the door of the corn crib to furnish him with a good dinner. The next morning, as soon as it began to grow light, for Mr. Crow was an early riser, he felt in his left-hand pocket once more, and he pulled out an elderberry. "That won't do," he said. "It's too early in the season for elderberries." But he ate the sample, though he found it rather dry, for it was last year's berry. And then he finished a bird's egg out of the same pocket. "My favorite breakfast," he remarked. He ate the egg. And at once, I think I almost said egg. I'm just gonna go back.
"My favorite breakfast," he remarked.
He ate the egg. And at once he started out to hunt for more. Some people say that he robbed the nests of several small birds before he had breakfast enough. Mr. Crow then proceeded to pass the morning very pleasantly by making calls on his friends. He enjoyed their surprise at seeing his bandaged foot. "I've the worst case of gout Aunt Polly Woodchuck has ever seen," he told everyone with an air of pride. It's not the everyone that has the air of pride, it's old Mr. Crow.
"Worst case of gout Aunt Polly Woodchuck has ever seen,"
he told everyone with an air of pride. When lunchtime came, it found Mr. Crow with a hearty appetite. And once more he felt in his left-hand pocket to see what he might have for his meal. He pulled out a squirming field mouse. Mr. Crow was about to eat him, but the mouse slipped away and hid in a hollow stump, so Mr. Crow lost him. Then he went soaring off across the pasture, and when he came home again, he didn't seem hungry at all. And that was a weird mouth noise.
Then he went soaring off across the pasture.
And when he came home again, he didn't seem hungry at all. Whatever he may have found to eat, it seemed to satisfy him. By this time, Mr. Crow had quite recovered from the fear that had seized him when he first discovered his swollen foot. And before he went to sleep that night, he thought he would take the bandage off his foot and look at it. He had some trouble in removing the bandage, and when he had succeeded in unwinding it, he could hardly believe his eyes. His foot was its natural size again. Old Mr. Crow looked at the bandage, and he saw, clinging to it, a mass of frogginess. Yep, we're going over.
His foot was its natural size again.
Old Mr. Crow looked at the bandage, and he saw, clinging to it, a mass of caked mud. He could not understand that. "Anyhow, I'm cured," he said sadly. He was disappointed because there were still a good many of his friends to whom he had not yet shown his bandaged foot. "I don't consider that Aunt Polly Woodchuck is as good a doctor as people say," Mr. Crow grumbled. "Here she's gone and cured my foot almost a week before I wanted her to." And the next day, he went over to see the old lady and complain about her mistake. "What have you been eating?"
He went over to see the old lady and complain about her mistake.
"What have you been eating?" she asked Mr. Crow. He told her. "Ah," said Aunt Polly, "it's your mistake and not mine. You ate was blah, blah, blah."
"Ah," said Aunt Polly.
"It's your mistake and not mine. You ate what was in your left-hand pocket instead of what was in the right-hand one. If you had followed my instructions, everything would have been all right." Old Mr. Crow felt very much ashamed. There was nothing he could say, so he slunk away and moped for 3 days. Though he did not know it, The trouble with his foot was simply this. He had daubed so much tar on his foot in Farmer Green's cornfield that the soft earth had stuck to it in a big ball. Mr. Crow recovered his spirits at last, and neither he nor Aunt Polly Woodchuck ever discovered that he had
Mr. Crow recovered his spirits at last.
And neither he nor Aunt Polly Woodchuck ever discovered that he never had gout at all. He forgave her at last for having cured his foot too quickly, for the affair gave him something to talk about for a long time afterward. He never tired of telling his friends about the trouble he had had. But many of the feathered folk in Pleasant Valley grew very weary of the tale before they heard the last of it. And of course, I pushed on to a chapter that was longer than all of the others. Possibly longer than the two shortest ones put together. All right. Mixing down, saving. Takes a little bit longer on this mix down because, again, I do have inserts put on this one. Just that little bit of gain and a limiter. I'm going to move it over to my proper folder. Now this time, what I usually do at day's end, but I'll do it now because it's our end for today. I'm going to look at all 7 of these chapters, check the properties of them all together, and get a runtime. So in this hour that I've been recording, I've gotten 29 minutes and 40 seconds of finished audio. Considering that I took time out to explain some things to you, that's not too bad. A 2-to-1 recording time is pretty good for me. Depending on the book, 2 to 3 is about my average. So I'm happy with that. All right. I intend to make this a regular thing. Telling Tales Tuesdays at 10. Next week, I have a family obligation though. So I will be here live again in 2 weeks. See if I can bring up my calendar here. November 25th, be live again, 10 o'clock. Next Tuesday, even though I won't be here live, that is when the first book of this series, The Tale of Jolly Robin, comes out. Link in the description. It's not on the library sites yet, and there was one other it hadn't made it to yet. But if you go to my website and the Tuck Me in Tales link there, you should be able to find pre-orders on most of those things. Otherwise, other videos possibly coming out between now and then, next live in 2 weeks. I will see you then. After, this is my first one, remember? I found the end stream button. Bye, guys.